Everyone has a story to tell. It's my mission to tell it. Unscripted, unedited, we are on the record.
Hi everyone, I'm Sarina Fazan. Thank you so much for joining us on this Wednesday. I am a producer and the host of On the Record, and today is one of my most favorite series. It's incredible stories from inspiring women. As I've shared with so many of you who follow me and the viewers, I really believe in women supporting women. Well, I have been so blessed to have such amazing women in my life, including my guest today, Laura McElroy. Oh my gosh, from the newsroom to national media strategist. You go, girl. You rock.
It's been a journey.
It's so great to have you. Thank you for coming in.
Thanks for having me here.
Oh my gosh, 100%. So we actually were two gals in a newsroom in our 20s, right?
Right.
So
running and gunning, covering the news, down and dirty in a minute 30. That was us.
So let me share a little bit about Laura, too. You are, honestly, someone that I admire and respect so much. You covered such hard news, but you have such this funny, charismatic personality that really makes me laugh all the time.
Because if we don't laugh, we'll cry.
Yes, you're right. So tell us, well, let's start with your journey. So you started, did you always want to be a broadcast journalist when you were young?
Pretty early on. I think that news really appealed to my personality. I think you have to have a natural curiosity about just about everything, from the way local government works to how people tick. And I think I was like, growing up, I was probably one of those kids that was driving the teachers crazy because I was always raising my hand with one more question about why. And then I think you have to have an affinity for people. Mm-hmm. And I really like people, genuinely like people. I like their stories, interviewing them and then sharing their stories. And then I think the news business appealed to my personality. It's fast-paced.
Right.
It's high energy. I was high energy. I always felt I was a girl that was ready to get it done. And so the news business just fit.
And you certainly did. We're sharing some pictures of you and your career, as we go throughout the show. What was so interesting was you were already at the Tampa station that we were at, and I really looked, here's me looking up to you. And the day that you were going to announce that you were leaving the newsroom, I thought to myself, what? One of the best journalists I've ever worked with is leaving news. You went to the Tampa Police Department as the communications director. Why did you make that move?
It was not an easy decision, and the first time that they brought it up to me, I was like, oh, that would be a fun job. But no, I can't do that. I've been in news since I was 19 years old working for National Public Radio. And then the second time I went down there and I tried the job on for size. I learned a little bit more about it. And I thought about it for a week, and I was like, no, I just can't do it. And then the third time, I went down there to return some materials that they had given me about 6 weeks later. And I said, hey, did you ever fill that position? And they said, oh, don't talk to us about that. You already told us no. And I said, well, it's taken me this long to really think about doing something else. I said, let me actually do the job. And so they put me through a mock news conference. And I thought, hey, this is kind of fun. And so I thought, I'll go for it. And if it doesn't work out, I'll go back to news. I've been doing news for 16 years. And so it really broadened my perspective, and it was a great opportunity. And well, the first 2 years, I woke up every day thinking I went to bed in my life and woke up in someone else's life. I mean, it was difficult to transition from being a media person to working for the police department. But I wouldn't do it differently. It was a good experience.
Honestly, I want to stay on this topic for a minute with the Tampa Police Department before we go on with now what you're doing, because it's giving me goosebumps when you're talking about this. The police department, you view the police department too, it's a very male-dominated world.
That's true.
It really is, right? And then here you come from a very fresh perspective from the media side.
Right.
So as their communications director, what the media needs and wants to be able to share their stories fairly. But how much pressure was that?
Well, when you're coming in as a woman and you're coming in from the dark side, from the media, that's the way the police department sees it. And then you're not sworn, not born. That you are not, I've never been down the dark alley to root out the bad guy, that's not what I was there for. I was there to bring out a different perspective. But when you have those three strikes against you, and then you're sitting at the executive staff table having an influence on the direction of the organization, there's a lot of pushback. So what I learned working at the police department is that what doesn't kill you really does make you stronger.
I love that song. Kelly Clarkson. Kelly Clarkson, I want you on the show, because I'm always working out to that song.
Well, and you always hear that line, but I lived it.
Wow.
So it did strengthen me and broaden my perspective and prepared me for what I'm doing today.
Well, Mayor Pam Iorio, who's also one of the women is one of my incredible women that I admire, was the mayor at the time, and it was
Right.
Chief Stephen Hogue.
Yes.
But then, one of my personal rock stars, Jane Castor, mayor now of Tampa.
Favorite.
Oh yeah, such a rock star. And can I just say on the record, I'd like her to come on the show. Jane, if you're watching.
You have to come. You have to come.
Yes, please. So then she takes over the police department, the first female police chief. Did that change things for you?
We were working so closely together while she was the assistant chief that it really we just slid right into a very good synergy. We saw things from a similar perspective. And so I think that really helped us click. So when we were dealing with a critical incident, operationally and also from the public messaging perspective, we saw it through a similar lens.
Do you feel that there should be more female police chiefs and more females within police organizations?
There needs to be more female executives in law enforcement. No, I do think that having a very diverse police department that represents your community is critical. And so increasing the number of women and the number of minorities working for the police department is important.
So let me ask you this then. So once again, it was a huge surprise when you left the newsroom. Another huge surprise when you left the Tampa Police Department. We're like, okay, I can tell you from a journalist perspective, you were the best communications director because you did come from news. So you understood both sides.
Right. I do think when you work in the media, you understand what the media needs to do their job.
Absolutely, 100%. But then you leave and you start your own business, the McElroy Media Group. And I want to group, so it's not just her. I'm so proud of you. So, okay, talk about that and talk about, if you don't mind, you do a lot and you've done a lot of crisis management. But there's been a lot of crises going on in the country, especially dealing with law enforcement, some other things. Please talk about that and what inspired you to start your business.
Well, when I was still working at the Tampa Police Department, I was contacted by the Department of Justice, and they asked me to help with another police department. It was Durham Police Department, North Carolina. And so I went there and did an assessment on their police department and on how they manage their public messaging. Because cops know how to handle critical incidents. They know how to deal with the operational side. But lots of times they don't think about, well, how do we share this information with our community? And because I had such progressive mayors and progressive chiefs who I worked for, we were able to try all kinds of new things, of ways to connect with the community. And so some of the things that I was able to do in Tampa, because I worked for such good leaders, I was able then to start sharing with other police departments around the country. So, most cops sign up to become police officers because they want to help people. But then they end up dealing with so many negative incidents out in the community, and they're dealing with people who are breaking the law, they can often get into an us against them mentality. And so I always saw it as our job in the police department, in the PIO department, to help connect the police department to the community. Because the police department can only be as strong as its relationship with the community. The community needs the police so that they feel safe and secure, and then the police department needs the community so they can prevent crimes and they can solve crimes. And so that relationship is so critically important. And so I was just motivated to share that with other agencies. And I do today work with agencies that just have 9 police officers up to 15,000 police officers. So I travel around the country, although now with the pandemic I do a lot by Zoom, but looking at the way they work with their local media. How are they using social media? In Tampa, we were the first police department to have cops singing and dancing on social media, which a lot
the first department in the country?
We were the first ones in the country.
Wow.
And I remember when I went to Chief Castor and said, you know, we want to do this video. So we were just coming off the Republican National Convention. We were all exhausted. And the Olympic swimmers did Call Me Maybe, and they lip synced to it. And so the number of younger people watching the Olympics skyrocketed as a result of that video. And so thankfully I had younger staff who like closed the door and said, Laura, you got to look at this video. And it was the Olympic swimmers. And so I went to a conference, an international conference of chiefs of police, and I went to the social media session. And it was packed because we're all trying to figure out, well, what's this social media thing and how do we use it in policing? And I stood up at the front of the session. I go, is anybody doing a video like the ones from the Olympics? And they all looked at me like I had 3 eyes.
Right, like, are you crazy?
And so then I started thinking we needed our own song. And then I was like, well, maybe we don't need our own song. Call me. Call us. We're the police. We're here to help you.
I love it. I love it.
So I went back and I told the chief, and Chief Castor was like, now you want me to do what? This better work, McElroy. And so we ran around the department. It was my staff, Andrea Davis and Janelle McGregor, who were our rock stars, and they shot the video. And it was, we launched it, and then it really had a splash. And it had a splash in a good and a bad way. They called it modern day community-oriented policing, and I was contacted by law enforcement executives from all over the country. But inside the department, some of the old timers who had been cops and seasoned veterans were like, called me up, that's the most embarrassing day of my career that we ran that video. So lots of times when you're trying something new, it's not always received well by the people you're working closely with because it's change, and change is nerve-wracking for people.
And it can be very difficult.
Right. And I was a change agent. That was my role at the police department. So I wasn't always the most popular person.
No, she's a trailblazer. So to the viewers, you know, Laura's used the word PIO quite a bit. That is Public Information Officer.
Right.
We are so used to that type of language, but sometimes people who are watching don't know. There's so much about this conversation that I want to dissect, but I want to go back to when you were called to the Durham Police Department. It was the Durham Police Department, right? To assess their
public information office,
which is amazing. So is that what gave you in your heart, like maybe one day I should have my own business doing that?
I think that it was when Jane Castor was retiring, and it just felt like the right time. It felt like the right time, and I had already from Durham went to Minneapolis and was working with the Minneapolis Police Department. So I had already started branching out and sharing what we learned in Tampa with other agencies. And sometimes from traveling around the country, what I'm sharing is not just what we did in Tampa, but what I'm learning from agencies that are doing it right in the U.S.
And I have to say, the Tampa Police Department, talk about doing it right. During Bollywood, not one arrest. Bollywood, with hundreds of thousands of people here. The RNC flawless after what we saw in Minneapolis.
Right.
So I want to ask you, and instead of going to a break, I want to continue this conversation about you starting your own company. There has been, and I know it's not just police crises that you do, there's been a lot of other national stories that you help navigate and send a message. But George Floyd has really been a name that we have heard a lot.
Right.
I would like to ask you your perspective on that case and what that did to police departments. But before you answer, I do want to say, you also said something that I think is very, very important. Growing up, we always looked at police officers, male or female, thank you so much for protecting our community. In recent years, I've gone to the grocery store, gone to the post office, and people have said to me, gosh, I don't know if I'd want to be a police officer because of pushback. So I'd like for you to weigh in on that.
Well, I think it's a very difficult time to be the police, and I think that the community standard and what the community expects from law enforcement is evolving and changing. And I think the George Floyd case helped push us in that direction. And I think that as so many police officers are quickly retiring and leaving the industry, I think that agencies really have to change the way they recruit. I think our current generation is much more interested in being part of something where they feel they're making a difference. You and I, when we graduated college, we wanted to get a job and get a paycheck. And that was the most important thing, to be in our career and to get a job. We'd go wherever we needed to go for the job.
There is us.
There we are.
I love it.
Two gals in the newsroom.
Jay, our producer, Jason, our producer, said, just look at the screen. Oh my gosh, that's when they cut my hair in New York for Glamour magazine. Remember, I called you up and I cried, and I'm like, they cut all my hair off.
I don't know, you still look pretty good to me.
You're so sweet. But back to that very serious topic.
So I think that today we have to, as law enforcement agencies, to appeal to that younger generation that they can make a difference in their community, and that instead of being out there as warriors, that you're out there as a guardian, that you're there to protect the community, and that we have to get back to the basics of good old-fashioned police work, where we really have relationships between the police and the community, which is what I focus on and what I really believe in, is that the police can only be productive and effective in reducing crime and making the community safe and improving the quality of life if the community believes in them, because the community gives them the power to do what they do. And so we really have to have that synergy, that energy, that connection, those relationships. And so that's really what my business is dedicated to, is building that connection between police and the community.
Well, I want to talk more about your business, but we'll go to a break right now, and then we'll come back and we'll talk about your business, your daughter, which is such a great story. I am crossing my fingers we have that picture too, and so much more. So guys, stay with us. We'll be right back right after this. I'm Sarina Fazan, a journalist, producer, and podcast host. With a background in television news, I know how much time and talent it takes to produce a broadcast quality production. But no more. Red House Streaming offers a simple, cost-effective method for capturing live action and streaming it in real time to YouTube, Facebook, or any other website. From single camera shoots or multi-camera productions, conventional or virtual sets, and from the state-of-the-art Red House Streaming Studios to remote locations, the professional crew at Red House Streaming, backed by the technology and reputation of CP Communications, allows you to produce more content at a lower cost and with little to no engineering required. That's why my podcast, On the Record with Sarina Fazan, is streamed live from the Red House Streaming Studios each week. Contact Red House Streaming today at 800-762-4254 or online at cpcoms.com to learn more. I'll see you in the studio. Hi, everyone. Welcome back to On the Record. And for this series, Incredible Stories from Inspiring Women, one of my women is Laura McElroy, rock star. In fact, this is the first show where I actually list out the women who have impacted me. You and your mom, of course, are on that list.
Oh, thank you.
No, I really appreciate it. You know, honestly, I feel like the way I'm dressed always now, like whether it's, emceeing an event for the community or on my show or when I was in the newsroom, was because of you and your mom, Louise Siney. I said to you, and I'll share a personal story. When I first got to Tampa, I was supposed to be on the anchor desk, but things happen, and I came as an anchor from New Orleans. Well, it took me 4 years to get back on the anchor desk. But do you remember what you and your mom said?
You're going to have to remind me.
Okay. It was you and your mom said, well, if you want to be an anchor, start looking like one. Dress the part. And from that, I was like, dress the part. And then I had some other news directors weigh in, but it was so much more than that. And it's not just dressing the part. It's everything. So my deepest gratitude, because I met you first, of course, and then you took me home to meet your amazing parents. So thank you.
Well, you hold your own pretty darn well, Sarina.
Oh, thank you, Laura Jean McElroy.
And you do look gorgeous.
Thank you. I appreciate it. So I want to go to the McElroy Media Group. And I know we spent a lot of time in the first half of the show talking about the police department. But tell us some of the other things that your company handles, and I know a lot of it is crisis management.
We do a lot of crisis communication. We do a lot of training on social media, local media, understanding what the local media needs in order to do its story. Because lots of times the people who are putting out the messaging for a police department are cops. And they don't necessarily, they might be good at being police officers, but they don't know a lot about messaging. So just helping them learn the way to tell their story. One of the things that we started in Tampa was having the first social media team of police officers and dispatchers in the country. And so now I'll train around the country with different agencies, helping them put together a team of officers who can tweet. And in the beginning, the police chiefs would say, "Oh, we can't give Twitter to them." And I'm like, "Well, we give them guns.
Wow.
We can let them tweet. It's okay. We'll just train them on the way to do it." And so that was another avenue for helping law enforcement agencies connect with the community, is getting them on social media and using that as a tool.
Well, you know, you really are inspiring, and not just to me. Tell us what it's like, though, when you sit in some of these meetings and you're the only girl. Like, share the story about walking into the Sears, what used to be the Sears building in Chicago. Because you're on multiple.
Well, actually, the very first time that I went into, it was a room of probably 30 dark suits and uniforms. And I got on the elevator and I was like, I'm brand new as, you know, managing the media and the communications and the message for the police department. I'm like, I am just going to be a fly on the wall. I'm going to just soak it all in and just learn. I'm going to be low key. So no one will even notice that I'm there. And so I show up to work and I'm dressed like a media person. So I have on my lime green suit with my lime green earrings and necklace and shoes to match. So I'm like as low key as like Kermit the Frog. And I get on the elevator and it's like everybody's in a dark suit. And then when we get to I come around the corner to go into the meeting and there's this long table on the 5th floor of the police department. And everybody's in a dark suit. And I was just wishing I was in a Southwest commercial. Want to get away? Not very low key.
See what I mean? You're so funny. So what lesson did that teach you, or would you change it for the world? I mean, I know you weren't low key, but you stood out.
I did, and I did learn how to blend in a little bit, and I learned the value of a dark suit going to some police meetings. But I think the value that I brought to the police department and that I bring to police departments around the country is that I bring a different perspective. If we think like the police, then a cop can do the job. We need to be able to help them grow and expand so that they can connect to the community. And we see, I mean, the protests that happen spontaneously in every single state across the United States after the death of George Floyd. That tells us that we have to improve our relationship with the community, that law enforcement has to do more, that the onus is on them to build that bridge and to build that relationship. And I think there's lots of people who support law enforcement, but we did see a very emotional and a very strong reaction to the death of George Floyd, which I don't think people were protesting just about George Floyd. They're protesting about their own relationship with their own law enforcement agency in their own city. And so that's something that we have to listen to and we must respond to.
Since that has happened, do you feel it's getting better, or do you think there's still a lot of work that still needs to be done?
I would say both. And I would say the reason why it's getting better is just how busy I've been. That the fact that there are so many police departments that are looking for help, are looking for ways to grow and expand and figure out, okay, what are we doing wrong? What do we need to do differently? And so after Ferguson happened in 2014, I started my business in 15, and it was a trickle. By 16, it was starting to pick up. But after George Floyd, it was instantaneous. We need help. And so I think police departments are waking up and recognizing, okay, we have to do some things differently. And that tells me they want to change, that they're reaching out and looking for help. And some agencies are doing a great job, and some agencies still have a lot of work to do.
Wow, that's fascinating. Is there anything we as community members can do to help build our relationships with our individual police departments?
I think talking to them on social media, if you're not comfortable going to a meeting, but going to a meeting, getting on a Zoom meeting. If you don't want to be on camera, just get on audio. I think getting engaged and getting involved. I mean, one of the greatest assets for any police department is an informed and engaged community. That they have a voice in the way that they are policed. That it's not just up to the police to decide how things are done, but that the community has a voice in that process. And that really can't happen unless the community is involved. That they're talking to the police department on social media, that they're going to meetings, that if there is an e-newsletter, that they're following it, that they're engaged so that they know what's going on in their police department and they're providing feedback to their agency.
You know, this is such a fascinating conversation, and modesty aside, you really are inspiring. You mentioned Janelle, who worked in your office, Janelle McGregor,
Yes.
and Andrea Davis, of course. So Janelle is still with the police department. They would tell me how much you inspire them. And again, I want you to put modesty aside. Do you see yourself as a role model for women out there?
You know, I think that all of us have a responsibility to pay it forward, because there were people who took time to help me when they didn't have to. And so for me, even when I was just a young reporter in the newsroom, if an intern came through and I saw that was an intern that was really ready to work, then I would take my time and dedicate it to helping that person. And I've tried to do that throughout my whole career. I just think it's the right thing to do. And then as the more that we achieve, the more I think we have that responsibility to reach back.
And I feel the same way. I really do feel the same way. Do you realize, though, and I'm sure you do, of course, you're her mom. Can we pull up the picture of little Morgan, your daughter, Morgan Fensky?
My favorite story.
Oh, my gosh, your favorite story of all. Okay, so I love this picture. I want them to pull. Oh, my gosh. There she is. So now she is the class president.
Yes, she is at Espiritu Santo Catholic School.
Okay, first of all, I mean, how adorable is this? But tell us, when I saw that, I'm like, oh my gosh, we have to show that on the air. Because her personality is that you would not think that she would have run for president. Share that story.
And that's why I was so proud of her, because she is a true introvert. She tells me, Mommy, we have different DNA. And I'll tell you just a really quick example. When she was 4 years old, I took her to Disney World for her birthday, and they put a button on you that says, Happy birthday, my name's Morgan. And so we get off the first ride, and all the Disney employees are saying, Happy birthday, Morgan. And she's like, Mommy, how do these people know my name? Why are they talking to me? And I said, well, you're wearing a button. And she's like, get this button off me. Whereas when I was a kid, I would have been like, can I get a second button to make sure that everybody knows it's my birthday and everybody wishes me happy birthday? So I have this very introverted child. And so when she got in the car the first day and said, Mom, they want me to run for class president. And I was thinking, really? because
you?
Because
no,
she
love her, of course,
is introverted.
Right.
And then she said,
and I didn't mean to say you, like you know what I mean.
But she then spent time talking to her teachers about it, and because it was the teachers who approached her and gave her the confidence to go for it. And she went for it, and she got up there and she gave her speech before her entire class or her school, and she's done a fantastic job. So I couldn't be more proud of her because it's outside her element. She's not a kid who's jumping out there saying, hey, look at me. She is a more reserved child. So I was really proud of her that she met that challenge. And I do think that I've tried to lead that way in my life, that if a challenge presents itself and if it makes me fearful, then that means it's time to dig in deep and to go for it. That you have to be able to face your fears in order to be successful. And that's why I was so, so proud of her, because she faced her fear and she went for it, and she did it.
And she did it, and she won. And I'm very humbled and blessed by this, but we do have viewers right now worldwide, which is very exciting. But share the Morgan and Morgan, because people who live in Florida will really appreciate the Morgan and Morgan story.
Well, her slogan was Morgan and Morgan for the students.
For the students. And who is John Morgan? So John Morgan, so people know, is a local attorney in town, and not here. He's based in Orlando, actually, but there are billboards of him all over the place, and it's Morgan and Morgan for the people. So she was driving. You were in the car, right? And she noticed the sign.
Right, and when she was very young, she came to me and said, Mommy, there's a man on TV, and his mommy named him Morgan and Morgan. Why would she do that?
It's so cute.
So that had, I think, stuck in her head. So it was a natural slogan for it. The Morgan and Morgan for the people is the billboard, and so she just made it into Morgan and Morgan for the students.
I love it. And she said, I'm Morgan Fensky, and I approve this message,
yes.
Which I thought was fantastic. And I just had to share that story, because you also gave Morgan some advice when she was giving her speech. I want you to share the advice that you gave her, because no matter what age you are, anybody can take this advice when you go up in front of a crowd. Remember grabbing the pedestal?
So I was giving her a few pointers, since I do train people in public speaking and being on camera. And Mom, I'm fine, I got it. It's not that big a deal. She wasn't that interested in my advice, but I said, okay, that's fine. You don't need to hear it, but let me just share it for me. Let me just do it for me. And I said, when you get up there and if you feel nervous, to hang on to the podium for dear life. And so when she got up there and she had her speech in her hand and she said, Mom, thank goodness she told me about hanging onto the podium, because my speech was moving so much that I couldn't see it to read it. So she put it on the podium and she said I had to hang on for dear life, and she was able to deliver her speech and she did it well.
Well, okay, this goes back to me. I don't know if you remember this either. I don't think you do. You would tell me proper presentation would prevent piss poor performance. We can say things like that because, you know, but you're right. So that goes, I think, not just for your wonderful daughter, but for any of us. And you've given us so much advice already. But what else would you say to young women out there?
So hanging outside my daughter's bedroom is a sign that says, never, 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 never give up. And I really think, and yes, we always hear that, and I would love to be able to share a kernel of advice that's enlightening to the next generation, that's, you know, something brand new. But I would say my advice is getting back to the basics, which is figuring out what you're passionate about and then sticking with it and not giving up. And I think we've all probably heard that advice before, but I have lived it and it has worked for me. When I very first auditioned for a job in a radio newsroom, was working for an NPR affiliate, and that news director said to me at the end of the audition that I really didn't have much aptitude in this field, and that I probably would never work in broadcast news, that I should look for a job behind the scenes, that maybe I could work as a producer or assignment editor. And at that time, here he is, a news director, and I'm trying to get a job in his newsroom. I thought, well, he might be right, but he might not be. He doesn't know me. I didn't know for sure that I could do it, but I knew it excited me and I was drawn to the industry and that it's what I wanted to pursue. And so I showed up the next morning as a volunteer at 5 a.m. for All Things Considered, and I was learning how to write on an old-fashioned typewriter in the newsroom, and I stuck it out. And so 2 years later, I was the assistant student news director of that NPR affiliate at the University of Florida. And so I think that life experience showed me that if you just pursue what you want, and that I would go and speak to classrooms and I would say, you don't have to be the smartest, you don't have to be the best looking, you don't have to have the best ideas, you just have to work harder than the person sitting next to you. You have to want it more and be willing to make the sacrifice and never give up. Just keep pushing through. And I think that has been the formula for my own personal success. And so that's what I would share with kids. Figure out what it is you're excited about. It's what you're going to do every single day. Love what you do. Once you figure that out, stick with it. And I was raised by parents who were drivers, who pushed us to be all that we could be without joining the Army. Nothing against the Army,
we
but that
really thank anybody who has served this country. Yeah, there's no proper words of thanks.
Right. It was just about, that wasn't my parents' advice. My parents' advice was they wanted us to develop to be everything that we could be. And with that said, when I decided to major in broadcast news, my parents said, well, what's your backup plan? I was like, well,
what do you mean backup plan?
Why do I need a backup plan? This is what I want to do. But they were nervous that that was a job that was very competitive, and maybe you graduate with this degree and you won't be able to get a job in it. So they said, well, maybe you should get a degree in teaching as a backup. Well, I love teachers, but I don't want to be a teacher. Like, I want to be a journalist. And so I, at that young age, was able to stick to my guns of what I wanted for my career. And I really believe that what we have to do is look internally and figure out what it is that motivates us, and then follow that instinct and stick to our guns, because there's going to be obstacles. There's going to be news directors who say this isn't the field for you, or even parents who are like, oh, maybe you need a safety net. You've got to be able to believe in what you want and stick with it and persevere.
I love that, because when you love what you do, it's not a job, it's a career.
I agree. It's a calling. I think if you are connected to your profession, that it is a calling to be. I believed in what I did as a journalist, of informing the public and making sure that we got information out to the community. And I believe very passionately in what I did at the police department, of making sure that the community was fully informed of what the agency was doing and trying to get the community to give us feedback. I believe that's an important role in our community. So it's less about working 9 to 5, and it's more about doing something that you're passionate about.
Well, you certainly are, again, so inspiring, and I love
As are you, Sarina.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. But you're on the record, and I'm not on the record, but I so appreciate that. So for this show, though, I want to end it in a different way, because you've also had some awful tragedy in your life that recently happened, and it was your younger brother, Rob, that was killed in a tragic accident. And he certainly, I was so blessed to have known him as well. The most confident and the most optimistic person.
That's a good description.
Yes, the most optimistic person that I met, that I've ever met in my life, and also really helped me personally get into that like exercise routine and, vent it out through running or, on the elliptical. Can we please talk about Rob for a couple of minutes? And again, we are so sorry for your loss.
Thank you. I think that Rob and I were similar beings. We used to joke that he was the male version of me, I was the female version of him, that he was so full of life and really had such a good heart, more so than me. I always say he was the best of the McElroy kids, because he had such a loving heart and really saw the good in people, and I think was very inspiring, which is perfect for the topic of the show, because he was inspiring to the people he touched. He was a natural leader, and he truly loved his fellow man, and that showed in how he interacted with people, and the legacy that he leaves behind are 2 really wonderful human beings, 2 little boys that carry a lot of Rob forward.
Absolutely, and his beautiful wife, Isabella. Of course, you said that they had,
a true love story.
A true love story, and I'm sure people might be wondering, though, because we didn't discuss how he died. Just so you know, that it was an awful accident.
Motorcycle accident.
It was a motorcycle accident, and but we miss him, and we're going to close out the show in a different way today, because we would like to dedicate the show to Rob McElroy.
I appreciate you doing that.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Thanks for joining us, everyone. We appreciate it.